this session is a real treat. It's a real treat for me. I've been following Kofi Boa on the internet. One of the beautiful things about the internet is you can sort of watch what people are doing around the world. And when I first heard about him, I looked at the Center for Crops Research in Ghana and started looking at some of the work that they're doing there. And I would encourage you, and hopefully he'll talk a little bit about that, but there's some wonderful videos on there about how they're improving their cropping systems in that area, and some of the unique ways that they're doing that. Just sort of stimulates me to think about how people get creative when they need to. But Kofi Boa is director of no-till agriculture for the country of Ghana, basically. His work at the Crops Research Institute for the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research in Ghana led him to begin to look at better ways to farm. He started out as a cocoa agronomist and soon learned that tillage and some of the slash and burn techniques that were sort of common to that area weren't really doing the things that the farmers needed to do. So it's the same thing that Ray was talking about earlier today, only in a little bit different environment. So in 2003, Kofi left the CRI, easy for me to say, and became a completely independent consultant and is basically spreading the word about no-till across the country of Ghana. His speech today is entitled No-Till Promotion Among Smallholder Farmers, and I think what it'll help us realize is that the principles that we're all trying to work on and the betterment that we're trying to do to our operations translate no matter where you're farming, no matter what kind of systems that you're farming under. So I'm really excited to really hear firsthand what Kofi's been up to in his research. Thanks so much. Let's welcome Kofi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good evening to everybody here. I'm so excited to be here. And before I go on, I want to thank the No-Till on the Plains very much for getting me here. And me standing here, two things come out. One, yesterday we kept hearing that no-till on the plains is growing. And to have a small farmer, holder, promoter, mingling with the big-time farmers, it gives me a sense of feel that, yes, really, no-till on the plains is growing. And once again, the other thing is that we are dealing with a technology that has universal application. I'm coming from the other side of the world, and we are here in America, and the principles guiding what we do there are the same principles guiding what goes on here as far as no-tillage is concerned. That shows that no matter where we are and at what scale we're operating, we are guided by the same principles. And this, to me, is very unique. And we all should be proud of ourselves for being part of this game. This evening, I share my experience with you on the promotion of no-till among smallholder farmers. And the smallholder farmer at home will be somebody who has about 2.5 to 3 acres of food crop farm. And mostly, the smallholder farmer will have limited education. No-tillage, as we see it and as we practice, is defined as planting in an untilled field covered with mulch. And this to me is very important because we have had the heretics hitting at us that no-till works, no-till doesn't work. And anytime you read deep into what they're talking about bare no-till. And so, once again, for us, no-till is defined as planting on an untilled field covered with mulch. Now, the beginning of the journey. It all started with my childhood pledge. I was 10 years when my father died. And at 12, I was left at home alone with my mother at a time when my 3 other senior brothers had left home for several reasons. And we have been farming. We were farmers. My father, my mother were farmers. And so, anytime at that age, when I go to school, my mother goes to the farm. And by the time I return from school, my mother will be home. But this particular day, I came from school and my mother wasn't home. And I felt a lot of people were not ready to talk to me. I became curious. Later on, I realized that I got to know that my mother was still on the farm where fire was raging. And deep in the night, I heard my mother coming home crying in the darkness of the village. And truly, her only cocoa farm, which was our only source of income in the family, had been burnt to ashes. Life immediately started getting difficult for us in the family, more especially for me, the youngest child left at home with my mother. So, within a couple of days, life became very tough. One day, I looked into the face of my mother and said, "Mom, I'm going to spend the rest of my life to fight the use of fire on the farmland." And truly, if I needed to do that, then there was a big task ahead of me. Because at that time when I was growing up, and even till now, clean land preparation using fire has been the biggest method of land preparation in my country. And so, if I had to get people to understand how to farm without the use of fire, then I needed to come with an alternative. And so, at that little age, I challenged myself to this task. And this is what has brought me this far. What I did was to talk to the very elderly people in the village. And through that, I got to know that in the very olden days when they were farming, they will clear the forest a year ahead of time. And by the time they come the following year, the trash would have decomposed or settled and opened up, and then they could just take away the prunings and then immediately plant through. And then they had very good yield without the use of any external inputs, be it fertilizer, fungicide, or insecticide. Then I wondered why. So they explained to me in the local language that this system was called proca. And proca in the local language means allow it to rot to bring back. And the question I asked was, to bring back what? And the answer was, to bring back the nutrients into the soil. So the point then was that if this was a neat system, why then was it abandoned? And I got to know that it was very difficult handling the trash. And therefore, they needed to get rid of it. And it was also influenced by modernization, that we needed to be modern. And therefore, the old things were bad. So we had to burn everything to open up and be able to plant immediately. So this then was the challenge, and I set up on this journey. So from then on, I continued to follow my mother to the farm on weekends and school holidays. And when she was still slashing and burning, I will always get a small piece of land and do the no-till, that is, plant directly through the mulch. And truly, my mother realized that I was winning the game, because we realized that it was so good for the production of plantain, bananas, which were planted with big suckers, but then it was also equally good and better for the production of maize. My only problem was that in those days, my mother would always have a little bit of better stand than me, but at the end of the day, I always had a better yield. So I became very much interested in the study of agriculture and decided to push it up. And so I went to college and I studied agriculture. And just after coming out of school, I tasked myself to work within a cocoa project, because that was where I had the biggest pain, when my mother's cocoa farm was burnt. And I said that I needed to make sure that the pain that I went through never happened to any other child of my age. So I got to work with the Ashanti Cocoa Project. And I tried, no matter how much I tried, to get the management and the farmers to come with me in terms of ensuring that we went back to the very old system. It never worked. I pushed and pushed, and it was not accepted. Fortunately or unfortunately, sometime in 1983, there was a big fire that swept across Ghana, and about 90% of the established cocoa farms got burnt. Then I said to myself, this is the time to win the game. But that was never going to be the case either. Because even after the fire, we continued going the slash and burn way to establish the cocoa farms. So my frustration grew and I had to leave. So I left the cocoa project and joined the research institute, where I had to work at the Crops Research Institute of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, and I was on the Ghana Grain Development Project. Within this project, I had the opportunity to do on-farm research. And so I was able to push the system of planting in the mulch and planting out of the mulch on the clean-tilled field. And I realized throughout all those years that, one, the yields were better on the mulch fields. In-crop weed control was lower because, back from the elementary science, which actually manifested itself, the mulch, in a way, controlled the weeds. So anytime we had the weeds coming, the crop of maize would have grown up and built up its competitive ability. And so all this put together a better yield, and having to spend less time and effort resulted in increased net benefits. And I became very enthusiastic about this because I was learning and building on the experience. Then I had the opportunity to go to Mexico, Summit, for some time, and at Summit, I also experienced no-till maize production. And this also deepened my interest in pushing the technology forward. Then came the real turning point, where I had the opportunity to do advanced studies in agriculture. And I sat and said, where should I go? Reading around, I realized that there was so much farming in Nebraska. And so I enrolled at University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I had to do a lot of field work in western Nebraska. The good thing about what happened to me in western Nebraska was that I got the opportunity to experience high-tech no-till farming. And I had already been in this game of low-tech no-till farming. So I said to myself that I am becoming a very unique person, having experienced the two extremes. So I was boiling to get back home to continue what I had started. And then I decided to go back immediately after graduation. Fortunately for me, when I got back to my institute, they had started a small no-till project. And this was a collaborative initiative between the Smallholder Farmer Development of the Monsanto Company, the Sasakawa Global 2000, and the Extension Services of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and my research institute. So as soon as I got back, I realized that was the place for me. I quickly established myself as a focal person in this project, and I assumed the leadership role. And so I brought with me experience from Western Nebraska, and also built on the experience that I had gained before I went to Western Nebraska. So this no-till project was focused on elimination of burning, something that I was dying for. Reduction or elimination of soil tillage in areas where people were using the hand hoe to till the land before planting. The increasing of organic matter on and in the soil, and more especially ensuring that we had material to cover the soil at the time of planting, and knowing all the benefits that we get from soil surface protection. And these were the times when I had to stand in front of senior soil scientists and be able to get them convinced that it was very important, especially in our part of the world, to ensure that the soil surface should be covered no matter what. And this was against the background of everything that people were pushing. Turn it in, get it mineralized, and get the nutrients in there immediately. And the people had forgotten that we were in a very harsh environment, in an environment where even if you leave it on the soil surface, because of the moist, warm environment, there is enhanced decomposition. And I remember working with some farmers, having had a very thick mulch on the ground. About 4 months later, the mulch wasn't there, and the farmers were wondering where the mulch had gone. And they knew I had not come to collect it and taken it away. So I told them it's there in the soil. And that is allow it to get back. And so we realized from these interventions that even if the mulch got devoured, the mulch decomposed, by the time it gets out of the soil surface, the crop canopy had established to further enhance soil surface protection. And then we also had introduction of certified seed, proper use of fertilizers and herbicides. And once you heard the name of Monsanto there, then it shouldn't surprise you that there was this herbicide input, Roundup, which I'll be talking about later. And the reduction in labor and time inputs. So these were where we were heading to. And we had to embark on a lot of activities, all guided by me, to ensure that we stay on focus. And notably, among these activities were pre-season training. So we had a lot of training going on before the season starts. and I had to move around almost every part to ensure that at least the farmers get to know what to do in order to put the grain in the soil in that much covered fields. We had to do on-farm demonstrations to show to people, to show to the farmers the potential of the technology. And through this, we had to do a lot of field days and farm tours. Now, the fact of the matter is that these interventions led to very good outcomes. And a few of these were that we saw rising number of farmers practicing no-tillage. And going from 1996 to about the time when the project ended, every year we're seeing increasing number of farmers doing no-tillage, which was very good and very encouraging, especially for me. Then, more importantly, we saw the number of crops planted under no-tillage increasing. Starting with maize, we went through, and even the root crops, through plantain, and more so the vegetables. And this was also very encouraging because then the system was like, it could be applied to almost all the crops that farmers were growing at home. Now we try to get farmers to appreciate the fact that farming is a business. And when it is so, the net benefit becomes very, very important. And looking at what we have on board here, you see that the net benefits were always positive, which was also very encouraging. So increase in net benefits of no-till over the traditional slash and burn systems. Now, the other realization is that the net benefits grew in times of bad weather conditions, especially rainfall. And this is what really got people enthused about the technology. Because we do mostly rain-fed farming. And in that system, and it is also on record that African soils have very weak structures, weathered, will not hold so much water. And one wonders why, in the minds of African technocrats, African agronomists, soil scientists, we should be spending time looking at tillage and the clean seedbed preparation, when we know for sure that our soils are so fragile, they have very poor structures. And so whenever we had limited rainfall, then the net benefit grew. And of course, even in the face of adequate rains, like in 1997, we still had very good net benefit coming out of our adoption of no-tillage. Then later on sometime in 2001, scientists from CIMMYT and my institute got together to actually assess the impact of no-tillage on the lives of people. And it was very interesting, especially looking at increased income, which at that time was the mainstay of every farmer. People needed money, and majority of our farmers were making it. More time for other activities. And this has stayed till now because of the fact that one will not have to spend all that much time on a farm. It has happened that we have people like carpenters, people like school teachers, people like masons, in other businesses that have time to also work in the no-till system, because you do not have to spend that much time compared to caring for the clean till field, of which immediately after planting, you definitely have to control the weeds. And this came neatly. But then, with these indications, one would have expected that by this time that I'm standing here talking to you, no-tillage would have spread to every corner of Ghana. But this wasn't going to be so for several reasons. The fact is that I mentioned the Sasakawa Global 2000 and the Monsanto company coming together to push this technology. And it has been the problem in Africa. Whenever there is a funded project, as soon as the funding stops, the project stops. And there are several instances where just a year after a project, you don't see anything or any impact of that project, all because funding has stopped, expatriates have gone back, knowledge is gone, and everything stalls. This is actually what happened. And so the momentum for the promotion of no-tillage died down completely. And this was a big worry to me as a person. So I had to stay back at the Crop Research Institute with a different focus at the office. But then I continued on my own to push no-tillage, showing people what to do, getting out of the office, moving into the farms, getting reprimanded. At a point in time, I had the director of my institute telling me, "Hey, Kofi Boa, sit down. I want to tell you, you are not an extension officer. You are a researcher. I want to see you here at the research station." And this man, I felt sorry for him. He was my boss, he was my director, but I realized that he knew very little. Because we were doing research, and there wasn't any one of those researchers there who was farming. So the point was that if I wasn't doing extension, and I had to stay put to do agricultural research and come up with results, what happens to the results? Who is there to take it up? And we were doing research with public money because it's a national institute. And these are the people leading us. So I incurred so much displeasure, but I continued to push on. Then the time came for me to make the critical decision in life. And that was to stop working for the government, to become an independent no-till consultant. And at the time I did this, I didn't have the least idea of where my clients were going to come from. And so I just got out of the office and said, I'm gone. I had a lot of friends getting back to my wife, telling her to just get me back, but my wife got to know about this decision when it had been taken, and my consent letter given to me. So there was nothing she could do. And most people thought I was getting crazy. And at a point in time, I told people, yes, I was getting crazy for the love of no-tillage, for the love of conserving the soil, ensuring that we're able to create a healthy soil, to produce healthy crop, to feed healthy people, not just for my family, but for everybody in the country. So I left, and I told everybody that if I never had anybody to work for, I was going to sit at home and just work on my small farm to keep myself and to teach other people. But just about that time, I had the Monsanto company coming to me again and saying, Kofi, we want to contract you in our smallholder farmer development, and that you have to help push Roundup for no-till farming. I accepted this, but 4 years down the line, I had to say goodbye, because I realized that there was more to what I was expected to do. It was never a case of ensuring that the product is used as an integral part of the no-till system. It was all about moving the product. And that was not acceptable to me. So I said, fine. Like I have always been doing, I quit. And as if by design, again, just about the same time that I quit, I met Mr. Buffett of the Howard Buffett, president of the Howard Buffett Foundation. And after talking to me, he became interested in me and decided to contract me to provide technical backstopping to a whole lot of projects that his foundation was funding across Africa. And I knelt down and said, thank God, this is a very good opportunity for me to be able to carry this to Africa, not just my home, but to Africa. And I said to him, yes, I'll take it and I'll do it. And this took me to several African countries. And almost all of these projects were implemented by international NGOs like CARE International, Catholic Relief Services, and others, in collaboration with local partners, local NGOs. My engagement with these projects back at home in Ghana and across Africa resulted in what I am doing for myself and for my country today. During my engagement with these projects, I made a lot of observations. Now, I realized from all this engagement with the projects that no-till was a new technology in several areas. It was completely new, and most of the projects, unfortunately, had proposals for which the key people on the ground had no input in coming out with those proposals. And so, knowing that it was very new in those areas, and the fact that the frontline people, agronomists who were contracted from the research institutes and universities to support the projects, as well as the technical staff, the frontliners, to engage with the farmers on the ground, had very little knowledge about what they were supposed to do. And so, in most cases, these frontliners were not able to sensitize the farmers very well. And so what I realized from these projects was that farmers really did not get it right. And therefore, a lot of people became very skeptical about the technology. So the first-time experience was that it's still bleak in their minds, because, like I said, getting it right meant that the people who were at the forefront should know so much about what they do. They should be experienced enough. I mean, we saw Ray standing here talking, and you could see from him that this is somebody who knows what he's talking about. You could see that this is a man who has experienced, and therefore, no matter the challenge that you have, you bring it to him and you have direction. This wasn't the case. And I remember a frontline person who had been hired to work on this project, to push it through to the farmers in their communities, telling me, Kofi, this thing will not work. Then I asked, then why are you here? You have accepted this, and you, the change agent, does not believe that it will work. How then can the person being changed change? This was a problem. And so, like I said, this increased my commitment to push more for no-tillage, to build the knowledge and skills of people. And then I got into this point realizing that most of these projects had ambitious targets. And it was not very unusual because the agencies that were implementing the technologies are agencies that previously were more into relief, like when there is disaster, when there is famine, when there is flood. Care International would then be resourced to distribute blankets. And when you are distributing blankets, there is nothing technical about that. And so long as you have the trucks filled with blankets, filled with maize, filled with wheat, that big fleet of vehicles can go and within a week or two distribute thousands and millions of blankets and thousands and million bags of maize. And so, when these relief agencies then turned into development agencies and then took on these projects and got the funding, they brought these ambitious targets in there. And realizing that no-tillage is a process-based technology, it happened that within a lot of these projects, then they will start it, get in there, and because they needed to reach the target, a 4-year project, a 4-year no-till project, within having to meet within the 4 years, then had a target of reaching out to 48,000 beneficiaries. And in doing this, it became like a hop, step, and jump sort of thing that we needed to go. And it came to a point where you got to know that technical staff will engage with a community, and they will not even be able to complete one cycle of crop production, and they will have to go to another community at a time when the previous community had not experienced much, had not seen much. And so it came to a point where I realized that there was a problem, and all this put together meant that people who were at the front line and people who were implementing these projects knew very little of what they were supposed to be doing. Then came the point of project duration. I have indicated that I realized in most of these cases, the technology was very new to people. And because of the very huge targets that people had to reach They were just running through it. Within a very short project life cycle, most of these projects were going from 2.5 years to 4 years. And because of lack of knowledge on the part of the technical staff, it meant that a 3-year project, most often will use the very first year to train the technical staff. And so in almost all these projects, the very first years were lost in terms of field work. And then also, the very last part of the project life, that is where people needed to write the terminal reports. And therefore, the effective project year duration was always very, very small. And so a 4-year project will be reduced to about 3 years or 2.5. Likewise, a 3-year project will go to about 2 or 1.5 years. But the key thing that ran through all these projects was that no-tillage was not like a technology such that you have a maize variety and you go into the community to show people how to plant in rows as against how to plant haphazardly, whereby you can do that in a day, let a crop grow, and within 1 season, the difference will show. Management and the yield, whatever, can be seen just within a season. And as I keep repeating myself, I got people to realize that no-tillage is a process-based technology, and if we do not have people who are so knowledgeable about what they are doing to be at the forefront to push it, there is a problem. If we have over-ambitious targets to reach within a very short period, there is a problem. And like I said, I took stock of all this, and that brought me to where I am today. I realized I needed to do something different. And so, in 2012, I set up the Center for No-Till Agriculture right in my village. And the key components of this center was that we had permanent fields. We have a place where farmers come, and if they are not able to go, they can stay. And we have a set of equipment now to address the technical needs of the handheld farmer, using the very basic no-till farmer using hand tools, and then the emerging medium-scale farmers, where we now have the 6-foot roller crimper, the 2-row no-till planter for that system. But all this, what happened, my engagement with Mr. Buffett and his foundation brought this up. When I set this up and they got to know about that, they became so much interested, and as I stand here, my center is a showpiece in Africa, where we get a lot of people coming, not just from Ghana, but from several other African countries to experience no-tillage. Now, following from all that I have said and looking at the deficiencies, we embark on strategies that we think are working now. The first is building and sustaining the interest and confidence of farmers in no-tillage. I gave an indication at the beginning of my presentation that we work with a group of farmers who have very little knowledge who have very little formal education. It is not like here where someone can go on the internet, can take a look at all that has been happening at the Dakota Lakes Research Farm and be able to make sense out of that and apply on his farm. It's not like that. The print media will not mean anything to these farmers. And so the key then is getting them to see and to feel it. And so we work on the premise that hearing is believing, but seeing is the truth. And so on these permanent plots at the center, we have a wide range of practices. Because we deal with people, we deal with a group of farmers who grow a lot of crops, and we want to make sure that everybody coming there gets to realize that the technology is suitable for the system that she or he is operating. And so we keep very busy making sure that at every point in time, when anybody comes, there is something of interest to meet the visitor's expectation. And so on this permanent plot, we get farmers to see repeatedly what the potential of the technology is, so that if a farmer comes here today to see what is happening and comes back in 2 months, in three months, in a year, in 2 years' time, the farmer will see the same plot carrying a very good crop, just like he saw previously. And that then solidifies their commitment. That then gives them the point, it gets to the point that, yes, this is something that really works. And this is very unique with the smallholder farmers who have very little education. And it's all about saying that seeing is the truth. And once people get to see the truth, people get to know the truth, then you don't have to talk. A case in point is where, on the field, we have the soil loss plot where every time it rains, we collect the amount of soil that has been washed on the no-till plot compared to the clean-tilled field plot. And you come to see barrels of soil collected on the clean-tilled field, but on the no-till plot, there is virtually nothing collected. And so we get to a point where the farmer doesn't have to, it gets to a point where you don't have to do any presentation to the farmer. He gets in there, he sees it, and the difference is there to show. We build a group of experts, farmers, extension agents, and university students, and a whole lot of categories of people. And this is very, very important because people have to have knowledge to work with. And this is something you cannot get from the schools and colleges around, because everybody is teaching the formal system, and the formal system is go till the land and plant. And we do this through a series of activities. The very first one is a exposure visit, where people come and we take them around quickly just for a day for them to get a feel of what can be done and the results. And most of the time, people going on the exposure visit always come back for a more detailed interaction with us. And that is something that is so good. And now, as I stand here, for life, I'm 61 years, and for the greater part that I have been in this processes, working from the Research Institute. This is the only time in my country where you get to see a group of farmers, smallholder farmers in their villages, in their communities, getting together to hire a bus to come to see what's happening at the center. Earlier on, it should be the Ministry of Agri putting people together. It should be the non-governmental organization putting farmers together. But this is the time when farmers out on their own, smallholder farmers, will get together to access knowledge, get together to come and see what is happening. And this to me is so great. We have a lot of training sessions, and the neat thing is that now there is a formal relationship between my center and the Peace Corps, and I know a lot of us sitting here have been Peace Corps. What has happened is that because of the negative impact of climate change on agriculture, the Peace Corps around our areas are now going more into engaging with farmers and showing them sustainable production options. And for this reason, there is always, anytime we get a group of Peace Corps, they are brought to the center for training. And when they go out, there is good relationship between us and the Peace Corps in terms of getting back and forth as to what is happening, and we supporting with technical backstopping. And now there is a liaison position within the Peace Corps between our center so that they get to know what is happening. And one of the things that they're pushing so much is they become so much interested in the use of cover crops, and now they are helping so much to spread cover crop messages as an integral part of the no-till systems. We have a lot of students now becoming aware of this. And so in this program, what we are trying to do is getting more and more of these students doing their practical attachment with us and coming and going back on field trips to their professors. We are finding a way of influencing the curriculum at the colleges and universities, and I think it's just a matter of time we'll get there. Then, once we get people to see things and take it, once we build knowledge to support the movement of the technology, we also make sure that we create awareness. And I came out with this repetitive message delivery action. That when the message gets to the person, when the message gets to the people repeatedly, all the time, it becomes so familiar and it stays. It's not just a matter of talking about it and living it. And so we are using a lot of strategies in this local information. Fortunately, in almost all the villages, in almost all the communities, there is a local information system, and we are, most of the time in these areas, talking about no-tillage, talking about the processes, and looking at specific times of the year for which activity is happening. Is it land preparation? And then just staying, doing a lot of talk about land preparation in these film shows. We have a lot of drama that we have put on tape, and it is so gratifying for typical rural communities. Being able to watch video in the comfort of their communities late night, late evening. And so, in these situations, they become very attentive to the subject matter. And the subject matter is what? It's no tillage. We're also making very good use of radio phone-in programs. And if you don't know, the telephone system in Africa is great. There is nowhere in Africa now that we don't have telephones. In fact, if you get to see anybody who is not carrying a cell phone, then that would be a primary or high school student. And most high school students will have it, except that they may not be allowed to use it in school. And so we also do a lot of this in the village, ensuring that we're able to talk about no-tillage, and right in the village, people be able to call in to answer, to ask questions, and to seek answers. The other thing is, instead of just getting up today and spreading thinly, we try to concentrate efforts through sustainable technical backstopping, burden sustainable technical backstopping. And here, what we do is to play on the farmer-to-farmer extension activities, peer group extension activities. What is unique about this last one is that we are able to build a group of local farmers, build them into champion farmers, and unlike government workers, unlike NGO staff that can easily be relocated, most of these people are natives to wherever we find them, and they hardly ever relocate. And so they are people that are helping, that are working, the people that are innovative enough, access knowledge, stay within the communities, and help to push that. So, what is coming out from all that has happened, and all that I have spoken about, is that for the category of farmers that we work with, to be able to get a message right, and to be able to build a masses of enthusiasts and adopters, three things have really come out. The first one is that whoever is at the forefront should be able to build himself so well in knowledge and experience, and be able to get it right to people, just like Ray did for us this morning. So it's about knowledge burden, and then being dedicated. A lot of things that I went through, I said no. I needed to push on. So you should have the knowledge and experience, you should be dedicated enough, and then you should adopt prudent strategies that would ensure that we're able to get a message right to the farmers for them to stay with us. And once again, I say that the three key things that I have realized and what I see in me in ensuring that we're able to carry this forward is knowledge burden, dedication, and adoption of prudent strategies. And that is why all the people that engage with us these days always make a commitment for a change. And as I round this up, I want to say that if there is any one of us here in this room who is not 100% committed to no-tillage, I want to say thank you for listening, but just like the smallholder farmers who listen to me and always make a commitment for a change, for those group of people, if there is any one of them here, I want to say thank you, but make a choice before you leave this hall. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boa. Questions for Dr. Boa? Right up front, Larry.
Okay, the question is how we're able to cope with the Ebola virus and be able to harvest cocoa and all that. Fortunately for us, we did not have Ebola. Ebola was in the sub-region, but it was more in Ivory Coast and Sierra Leone. And we never had it, so Ebola did not affect us in Ghana.
I have a question. One of the things that we found in the United States and was being talked about here at this meeting is the importance of having the right crop rotations to go along with the no-till. What kind of rotations have you, what have you found about the system that has changed the rotations that farmers might have there?
Okay, thank you. Now, we deal with a group of farmers that grow a wide range of crops, mostly in mixtures, and then in rotations. Now, every farmer at the beginning of the season will want to grow some maize because it's seen as a cash crop. And then the others will come in basically for the house and also a bit to sell. So anytime there is this, whenever there is maize and it goes, the crops, a lot of times, will have the other crops like the legumes, cowpeas, more especially the dry beans, coming in. And then also, in addition to that, we have the cassava, plantain, and some vegetables. So what you realize is that after the maize, the beans and others will come in, but finally, you have the plot stayed with plantain and cassava. Now, when the cassava goes away, then between the plantain, other crops will come in. But on the strict rotation, it has mostly been maize, vegetables, maize, and then the legumes. Of course, we have introduced a lot of cover crops in the system. Cover crop was introduced long ago in the sub-region by the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture in Nigeria. But cover crop never got established, all because, and it's part of the fact that not much was done in terms of looking at the farming systems. It was like cover crops are so important, let us get that into the system. And the very initial cover crops that came into the system were the velvet beans, the very aggressive ones. And we deal with smallholder farmers who might not immediately be able to sacrifice a complete growing season or a complete year just to put a cover crop there for nothing. Fortunately, we have been able to go around this, and we have a lot of the dry beans that fit into this system as intercrops, and more especially now we have some of these cover crops like the bushy types that can come under the maize, can come under the cassava, can come under even the vegetables, and they die very fast. So within the period, the cover crop would have completed the life cycle, burned the nitrogen and other nutrients in there, and would have also burned a lot of the biomass and added organic matter to the soil. And this is what is pushing the system now.
So you don't have to terminate those cover crops. They actually go through their life cycle and die, right?
They die. But whenever there is an opportunity, the other thing we're doing is that in the life of the second crop, for instance, we put in the most aggressive cover crop so that when we have harvested the maize and the cover crop has established, normally some of this like what we lab and the most aggressive velvet bean and the jack beans can stand the drought once they get established. So the trick is to introduce that into the commercial crop at a time when there is a little bit of moisture to get that to establish. And once that is done, the cash crop gets harvested, but then the cover crop takes over.
Any other questions for Dr. Boa while we have him? Well, let's thank Dr. Boa for coming to us and sharing today. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.